world feels a bit toxic and blah these days, doesn't it? The same old people coming up with the same old solutions for big problems that still don't work. We need to change the game. Well, welcome to Women Advancing. Join me, host Kate Byrne, in this dynamic bi-weekly podcast, bringing together female founders, funders, and thought leaders. Listen to the people driving change, how they got there, how you can help, and yep, how you might just be the next one to advance. Proof that all ships rise with women at the helm. That's what happens when Women Advance with Kate Byrne. Hey everyone, it's your Women Advancing host, Kate Byrne. So what happens when you hand the mic to a media powerhouse who believes media broadcast isn't dead yet, and nor is it for pledge drives, and it sure as heck is different than what your grandparents used to listen to? Well, you get Jayme Swain, who's the CEO of VPM. That's Virginia Public Media. She's a woman who's rewriting the rules of storytelling in real time. In this episode, we dig into what it means to lead with purpose, the magic of local journalism, and why the future of media might just be a little more public and a lot more powerful and so much more accessible than we think. This one, it's a broadcast of bold ideas. Listen in and then share yours. We are so lucky. You are in for such a treat, Women Advance listeners. We have got Jayme Swain, who's the CEO of VPM, that's Virginia Public Media, joining us today. And we're going to do a deep dive into all things Jayme, but also really kind of doing a highlight and a focus on the importance of media, but also local media and how we can start to build trust again with media. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. So Jayme, welcome to Women Advancing.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I just love the whole philosophy and idea of this wonderful podcast, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Believe me, you make it shiny and new. Let's just jump right in, if you don't mind. I get excited and I just want to kind of go right there. Okay. So, lady media leader, and I've had conversations with a few, with Amy Bernstein, who's the editor-in-chief of HBR. I've had Stephanie Mehta join me. I've had Sandy Hausman. You've led at both PBS and VPM. What first pulled you into the world of public media? Was there a moment when you knew, boop, boop, this is my calling?
There was a moment.
Really?
So, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I always knew I was going to be into television. I knew I wanted to be in journalism, and I'd always worked in commercial media. And I was at a startup, and it was sort of journalism adjacent. And it was chaotic, and it just got to me. And I think I was at a point in my life where I said, I want to do something more meaningful. And literally in 2008, I begged PBS to take me. I was interviewing around DC. I was in DC at the time, mostly commercial media. But I remember McNeil there as a kid. I grew up with Channel 13, being from the Jersey Shore. And I kind of wanted to come back to my roots. I wanted to come back to something meaningful and spend my time, I think, making a difference. And that's why I ended up at PBS.
So when you wanted to be in media, was it from the journalistic side, or was it in front of a camera, or a combination of both?
It originally started just anything with television. Again, I'm a child of the 80s. I watched everything from game shows and soap operas to MTV. But we did a lot of, when I listen back or I sort of reflect back, I remember Cokie Roberts. I remember we would sit down and watch Tom Brokaw every night, right? These were the days where you didn't have a lot of channels. And we would talk about it as a family. We got the newspaper. We got Newsweek. I mean, we actually were a pretty voracious news consumer family. And I had sort of the indelible mark on me that information is important. And so when I started my sort of thinking about my career in media, I definitely decided to pick the journalism path. But I knew I wasn't a reporter. The producer route was much more sort of my wheelhouse. I kind of like to be behind the scenes, making it come together, telling those stories and making it work.
Right. That's so funny. We were a Newsweek family too.
Yeah. Right. And you get it every week. And I remember pouring through it as a kid. Right. And we would talk about it. We would talk about the New York Times. We talk about USA Today, Time Magazine. These were all things that were in and out of my family all the time.
And also for us, it was also National Geographic.
Oh, yeah.
I can remember we would make popcorn and then we'd go watch 60 Minutes.
Oh, right. I mean, I think about the Sunday morning shows. That's where I fell in love with Cokie. We watched the McNeil Lehrer News Hour. There were times that we would we'd sit down, we'd watch a documentary. I think that was drilled into me, this sort of sense of information. And then not just watching or observing that, talking about it, debating about it, saying, hey, these are the facts we just saw. Let's talk about it. We might all have different perspectives. And to me, that's what we're missing now. What is it that we can all trust and get behind and then convene and certainly my brother, my dad, my mom and dad, we didn't all agree on everything, but that was the basis of that conversation.
I couldn't agree more. The importance of just critical thinking and just debate. And I also think for that very reason, it instills and it seeds in you bare curiosity.
That's right.
It's not a judgment. I'm right, you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. Not about that. It's like, how do you see it that way?
That's right.
Did you come to that without any kind of judgment and sort of value statement attached to it?
Well, I say to people now, I actually talk to a lot of people about news and the news ecosystem, particularly local, and at a time where public media is being criticized. And one of the things I say to people is that news is not here to validate your belief system or your values. It is here to actually make you think. And if you think something's biased, do a couple things. Why that is, right? Maybe read another source. Ask what you are thinking. Like, why do you think it's biased? I know not everyone can do this, and you mentioned critical thinking, but I read all kinds of different stuff. I don't believe any one thing because I try to sort of say, okay, how does this really come together? What's ringing true? And if I see it in the similar places, and again, I'm a traditionalist. I'll look at that Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and still things like The Economist and obviously public media. And then I sort of pull together, okay, here's what I think is coming forward.
But see, I think it's really interesting that you raise this point because you look at a number of different sources. So in this era of AI,
right,
where we're going in and riddle me this and get that answer, I think one of the biggest dangers, and it's tied to that, is that people don't take the time to do what you just said, to question, to counter, to sort of build a quilt, if you will, or build a series of different conversations. It's just sort of like, well, that's what the computer told me.
That's right.
Right?
Maybe AI will make us more discerning and a little bit more skeptical. It's actually funny. I saw a 60 Minutes piece where they're talking about teaching digital literacy, but AI literacy to students, like teenagers. You know what they said at the end? They're like, this was great, but can you show my mom this? Can you show my dad this? Because they grew up in this. We always think, oh, they don't have digital literacy. I actually think some of the worst offenders are people of my generation. I'm a Gen Xer, looking at my parents, boomers, others, not really thinking because it's not innate to us. It's not something that we're used to.
It's so funny. I had mentioned earlier before we got on that I had done this conversation, these 3 presentations to a group of auditors, and one of them was all about the different generations. Mm-hmm. And of course, the 5 key pain points really that the industry is embattled with. And one of them, of course, is tech and disparate. Yeah. And one of the younger set, probably a Z, said in the chat, I just wish that my boomer colleagues would just take a chance, open up the tools and just see if it would work. And I do think it's right. And I often think, I've thought this since I worked with George Lucas Education Foundation, I had kids coming to me and telling me, Kate, we have to dumb down when we get into the classroom. And that's not because the teacher's stupid. They just don't know how to use the technology. And they're just not as abreast that just the pace they've surpassed us. And so really, who should be teaching whom?
Right.
Is there a way we could do a little bit of a broader embrace of reciprocal mentorship?
Yes.
On all things. Well, so what's the biggest myth about public media that you find yourself constantly debunking? Because if people are sort of swinging and taking hits at public media now, what is that?
There's a lot of myths. I think one of them is that we're for your grandparent, right? We're for that old school TV, radio, and that is one of, I think, the biggest myths. We VPM, so just if people don't know what that is, so much of public media is truly local. You'll hear about PBS, you'll hear about NPR, but where we started was local media, local stations who used broadcast for educational purposes. And then in 1967, the FCC chairman at the time, Newton Minow, said, these broadcast airways have become this vast wasteland. And so let's set aside broadcast spectrum for educational purposes. And then LBJ put together the Public Broadcasting Act, which there is a federal appropriation. One myth is it goes to PBS and NPR. It goes to stations like ours and VPM, headquartered in Richmond, covering Central Virginia, and stations across this country. And there is a view that we're still that we're just these old TV people. But I can tell you, Kate, like our newsroom, we're on Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, Blue Sky. We want to be where people are. And I actually think public media can be more innovative due to the public-private partnership that the federal dollars currently support, because we're accountable to the American people. And so we need to make sure we're where all of the folks are watching. And the reality is that is changing rapidly. So it's not like we're worried about selling ads on television and that's drying up, or, we're some conglomerate somewhere. We are local media. We are owned locally, which are some of the only local media across this country. And we are innovative. We're constantly innovative. And I actually think that vast wasteland statement is more prominent now. So if you go online, if you are a 22-year-old and you're looking for relevant information on TikTok, don't you want us there? Don't you want your local public media? And guess what? My reporters are the same age as those people. They're young, they're diverse, and they live in community, and they can be trusted. And I think that's under attack. And to me, isn't that who you want to your kids to listen to? Isn't that who you want to be able to find on these platforms?
Absolutely. It's really interesting. I'd never really thought of it through that lens. In so many ways, it's peer reporting.
That's right.
And who better? Because they're at least, especially as you just said, you want to meet everybody where they're at.
That's right.
So if you want a trusted source, more often than not, right, a peer is going to at least have some kind of, you're going to start from a similar understanding level. Yeah. I would think for sure. Well, so how do you define innovation when you're in this media-driven media org like yours? You tap some of it, but what are some of your prouder products as of late that sort of demonstrate that people could go and check out?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I came to VPM in 2019, you do have an organization that's been around. We're actually celebrating our 60th anniversary this year, which is incredible, right? It's something that people were in people's homes. They have a deep affiliation and affection for it. But at the same time, we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to reinvent what does public media look like in 2025. So we launched podcasting. I hope people check out our podcast. We have an investigative podcast called Admissible Shreds of Evidence. That's an extraordinary true, like those people who like true crime, your podcast folks that are listening, check it out, because we are one of the only people who did that local story on podcasting, deep investigative journalism. We're on social media. We've launched YouTube channels. So we have YouTube, and we're doing local news on YouTube. We're even doing Spanish language short form YouTube, because we have a growing Spanish language audience here in Central Virginia. So check that out. Follow Style Weekly. Style Weekly was an alternative publication that started in the 1980s in the Richmond region. It then was bought and sold many times. Finally, a hedge fund called Alden Global Capital bought a bunch of assets from Tribune Media Company, and they've done this across the country, and they shuttered it. Well, we came in to buy Style Weekly, so you can go to styleweekly.com, and it was a weekly paper. Well, that business model doesn't work anymore. So we said, well, let's step back and really think about what it is. So we do 4 publications a year that are stunning. They're really sort of for your coffee table. But our Instagram will get like hundreds of thousands of views because it's spectacular. And it tells you, what people also want to know? What artist is coming in town? What restaurant is coming? Who's coming to the VMFA? As in community, we want to know what's happening in community, not just the politics, but the celebrations and the activities. And Style does that, but in a new way. So I hope you can go to vpm.org, styleweekly.com, and sample public media, and you might be surprised at just the breadth and depth of what we're doing.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? People are thinking, oh, it's so stodgy, but really what might be stodgy is their old outdated beliefs.
I think the myth is what you think your grandpa's public media is not what it is today, certainly.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, so the trust piece.
Yeah.
as you were just talking about, we were just sort of covering. We all know it's fractured in general, just public trust in media in general. Is how do you lead an organization that kind of has to both balance that line of both informing and building trust, but you're doing it across a number of different audiences?
Trust is something we think about every day. Our entire business model is based on trust. The idea is as your listeners, if you trust what we're doing and we're bringing you relevant content, we hope you support us, right, with your hard-earned dollars. So we have to earn that trust every single day. And I think there's a couple of pieces about that. One is authenticity. We need to be authentic. You need to feel that you can trust what we're saying. You can trust the information. You can trust the storytelling. We have to reflect the diverse communities we serve. And that means in all of its fullness. So whether that's race, ethnicity, age, geography, viewpoint, you need to be able to see yourself in what we do, right? That's relevant to you. We also need to be transparent. So particularly on the news front, again, there's myths about our journalism, but we post our ethics and standards right on our website. You can come, we do regular open sessions where you can meet our journalists. I think that's incredibly important. We do a lot of opportunities to say, tell us what you think, and that shapes our coverage. So every year for the General Assembly, we do what's called the People's Agenda. We out there, what do you want to know? Not just what we want to know, sitting in some room somewhere, making up what we think people care about. No, we're public media. And so asking, and then you respond to that. Don't ask people for feedback and then not do anything with that. Because then again, that's inauthentic. That's not very transparent. So I think there's a couple of values that we hold dear that hopefully help us earn that trust. And again, we think about this each and every day. And we live in community. We go into community. It's not just broadcasting. It's convening people together. It's being out there. It's hosting events. I'm constantly out in the community. People have my email. They can talk to me, right? I'm not just some figurehead somewhere. I live here. I'm on boards here. I'm involved here. I care about the community just like all of my neighbors.
I was just going to say community figure because you are incredibly accessible, which is so not often the case. At least with my past media experience, that was so not the case at all. Well, so you're talking about some of those innovation pieces and things you're sort of pushing things like with social media and such. Has there been a decision that you made as CEO that felt risky, but it paid off?
Well, every day, but you're not. I'm actually a risk taker. I lean into risk. I think the biggest thing that we have going on right now is we are building a new building in downtown Richmond. So our current headquarters in Richmond is a 1964 facility that's in Chesterfield County and was always a wonderful home for us. But we sit under two 1,000-foot broadcast towers. The facility is aging. It doesn't have the technology that we need to do all that innovative work I just talked to you about. And that space is surrounded by retail and housing, and you can't find us. And that doesn't feel very public. And so I give a lot of credit to the board. It was a time to take a bold step. And so building from ground up, a brand new building, we are moving into downtown Richmond. So for any of your listeners who know Richmond, we are going to be a few blocks from the General Assembly and the state capitol. We are on Broad Street, which is truly the heart of our city. We believe in downtown Richmond. But I was down there today. It's a big thing, Kate, building a building. I learned a lot about construction that I don't ever want to have to remember again, but it's risky. Now we're doing this in the midst of a federal funding fight. Where we could lose a significant amount of resources. But at the end of the day, it is still an incredibly important investment in VPM, in our future, in our talent, in our community. And right now in moments like what we're going through now is what do we value as community? And I value our local storytelling. I value information. I value our neighbors and our community. And I think that building is not just for VPM, it's for everybody. And it's still the best decision. While people ask me, are you guys still going to do this? Yeah, I don't know if people have noticed, but if anyone drives around Richmond, it's nearly up. So yes, we're fully committed to moving that forward, no matter what happens with federal funding.
That's terrific. And that's also just another way to change, and I'm going to say the trajectory of different people's ideas of what they could do and what they could be.
That's right. people's mindset about us completely. I think we're on a consideration set that we haven't been. We're more relevant. Again, we have to be relevant to the people that we serve. And we serve so much of Virginia that being in our state capital is incredibly important to the constituencies across the state.
Absolutely. Well, also, so you like risk. I'm a risk lady myself and kind of shaking things up. But I know that's what some of your, news coverage has been doing. What's your vision for the future of the region?
Broadly of our region?
Or regional storytelling. Let's put it that way. I'll say it that way.
I think what's been interesting is if you look at the media ecosystem, so much of our storytelling has been nationalized. So if you look at your local broadcasters, a lot of those TV people are owned by larger companies headquartered elsewhere. The newspaper industry, which is largely collapsing, anybody that's left, you have a lot of those owned elsewhere. You luckily have a few family-owned papers and things hanging on. But so the question is, what does storytelling look like? And for me, again, community storytelling, the reason I went from PBS to local is because what matters day in and day out is what is happening in your community. What is going on? How do people get involved? How can we be good citizens? So I think public media is a great place to be stepping into that storytelling vibe. So not just news, but just to give you some other examples, we found when we looked at our region, we have a large rural population. And when we surveyed people feel like their stories aren't heard, right? There's a lot of pejorative about rural community, like poor rural community. But the truth is, there's amazing innovations happening in our rural communities across Virginia. And so what we decided to do was have a series called Life in the Heartland. And it's produced by two producers that come out of Staunton, Virginia, so it's people who live here telling the stories of other people who live here. And it spotlights different communities and different things happening across rural Virginia. And we can then do events and convenings. And I tell you, people are like, thank you, because our stories weren't out there. We weren't heard, and these things weren't elevated. And we should all care. It doesn't matter that such and such thing is happening in Augusta County. That's still Virginia, and that's still in. And so it's that type of thing. We did a documentary about Edna Lewis. So Edna Lewis she was a chef, Black chef, but no one had heard of Edna Lewis. She had some of the greatest impact on culinary arts and how we think about food today than anyone, but that wasn't a story that was ever told. It was a story that was buried. So we brought that forward. That is now a national documentary on PBS, so people across the country can see that and experience Edna Lewis. So to me, our culture, our society, strong communities are built on stories, on storytelling. And if we do it, who will be there to do it? So my vision is for a strong, robust public media and others, not just us, humanities organizations, other media outlets, doing the work to elevate and celebrate all that we have going on here in the Commonwealth or wherever community that you live in.
Well, I was going to ask what you're doing to, ensure that, voices historically that are underrepresented and also just equity-based programming, which may be hit from funding and such, but it sounds like you've got that more than covered.
Well, I think because it's in our DNA. It's who we are. We said we have to represent the fullness of everybody that we represent. That means being authentic, being in community, listening, and saying, oh, we hadn't heard this story. And being, you have to build that trust. So you can't just go into a community and say, tell me your story. It takes time. And you have to build those relationships. And then someone will come to you and pitch you an idea, or you'll be able to create sort of that environment where someone, brings you in. We're actually working on a documentary right now about Abraham Skipwith, who is the first Black homeowner in Richmond. And Anjali and Sisha Moon have been working on some research about Jackson Ward here in the Richmond region and how it was the Harlem of the South. It was this burgeoning, growing area. And it was one of these areas that was destroyed. But his story, nobody knows that story. Same thing with Vinegar Hill in Charlottesville. Right. We did a documentary called Raised about urban renewal and this concept behind it, but that this community was flattened. And Kate, when we showed that in Charlottesville, I had people in tears who said, I have lived here my entire life and had never heard that story. And I felt like we were so honored that Lorenzo Dickerson did that work with us because he trusted that we would give him the space and the ability to do the story and tell it how he felt it should be told as somebody who was a descendant of a family from Vinegar Hill. So that's how we think about it. It's being in community, it is building relationships, and it's being that trusted place, hopefully. And that's across the board, whoever comes to us.
So, absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think you've done a terrific job with it all. So what, and this is it's kind of counter because you've gone this local embrace and kind of role of, okay, we're sort of the steward.
Right.
And as it really comes through to me. So you've worked in big media though, and those big media systems. Is there a lesson that you carried over from there that's been helpful?
I think from a national media, I mean, certainly you learn the tools of the trade and you learn from some of the best of the best. I mean, some of my mentors and people who were incredibly strong. I mean, at CNN, there were some incredible reporters and producers and others I was able to be around. But I think I take away something that was challenging in those big places, and it was culture.
Yeah.
And I really believe the phrase culture will eat your strategy for breakfast. I mean, and they make television shows off of this stuff. Newsrooms can be vicious places. You work a lot of hours. You're not getting paid very much. It can be ugly. I was in the startup world. That was very ugly. And I think what I came away from is that you can create a media environment where you can have a culture where people feel seen, heard, they have belonging, they can thrive and be their best. And we don't have to scream at people. And we don't have to sort of behave in a way that I don't know why that became a culture in media companies, and it still happens to this day. And and people that you've had might have talked about this, but it really sort of stuck with me. And then when I went to PBS and I saw an entirely different culture led by one of the best women, Paula Kerger, who's been the head of PBS for almost 19 years, is singularly one of the best media leaders in the country, and what she was able to do and build and how she was able to create that. And part of it is she brought people in who believed so much in the mission, who cared so much. But it's again, fostering that culture of people thriving. And I think I get better work out of people and more out of people than screaming at somebody or just doing some of the terrible behavior I saw in newsrooms or other places, other media organizations.
And that kind of behavior, it stays, you can't unsee it. And you kind of can't unfeel it. Even thinking about some of the moments that I've had to endure, and I'm sure so many listening have had to too. But kind of makes you a little queasy. Well, so then, Jayme, what 3 words would you use to describe your own leadership as a result?
When I think about my leader, I always try to think about it, not what I think, because then I'm like, am I really?
Well, how would someone? Yeah, fair.
And I'll tell you what they would say because they tell it to me. One, I am a driver. I'm an athlete, but I'm a driver. I push hard. So that is true of me. I'm an athlete again, and I'm a sprinter particularly, and so I do push hard. I'm decisive. I think that's one thing I've seen of other leaders, and I'm like, I'm not going to be that. We're going to pick a path, and we're going to go, and we're not going to navel gaze for too long. So I think they'd say I was decisive. I think the thing I hope that they say, though, is that I'm also supportive. I'll tell you, during COVID, it was an interesting leadership moment because driver, as someone with a high bar, I'm like, here we go, guys. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute. People are hurting. People are scared. I have to dial the driver down, and I have to dial the compassion up. I have to dial the supportive nature of me up. And that wasn't a natural sort of space to be, but I hope that people feel that I support their careers, I support them personally, that I care about them, because ultimately it's all about people. And I want everyone who's working with me and my colleagues who I'm so fortunate to work around, that they feel that. Yes, I might drive. Yes, I might move the goalposts in excellence. Yes, I might do those things, but inherently that I really do care about them as people.
Yeah, believe me, I'm sure that comes through in spades, I've got to say. And I remember leading in COVID, and it was spending so much time in our little squares. But I remember we would have to go to Slack, Slack channel, and you would have to pick a word, and you would have to pick an emoji every day that said how you were feeling. And at first I rolled my eyes going, are you kidding me? But then it got to be kind of fun to see who could be the goofiest or who could be the most outrageous or. So but it's true. It opens your eyes to.
And we all bring stuff to work, right? And I've been a hard driving, especially in that commercial media landscape. Nobody cares what's going on at home. You show up, and if you work your 12 hours, and there were some traumatic things. Like I remember being in the newsroom floor when Columbine happened, right? And there's things that we all go through sort of in that ecosystem. But again, remembering that we're humans and that people are coming in, they've got issues with their kids. We have so many folks dealing with caregiving for parents right now. And you have to just, again, put that compassionate hat on and remember that people are their whole human self, and there's a lot going on there. And it's hard as a leader, right? Because you see a vision. I have a vision. I want to push towards it. But at the same time, you really just want to make sure. And that was a lesson for me during COVID. It wasn't, and that's not an innate place for me, but it was a really good lesson for leaders, all leaders.
And I think that encourages the winning result of that is extraordinary loyalty. And also because the people feel heard. That's definitely really the true definition of belonging.
That's right.
Understood. And also understanding, hey, that's what this person's going through today. I may be going through it tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I might need that empathy. I might need that grace.
I might pull the E card. Exactly.
And I think, a lot of leaders, someone will say to me, again, I'm sort of an ISTJ, like be human, right? Jayme, give a human moment. How's that going to be? But true, because I had my own issues. Then I was able, if I gave grace and empathy to others, then when I'm not at my best, sometimes people think a leader is like, I'm not a machine, right? I'm still human too. I just happen to be in this seat at this moment, stewarding this. And that's a real privilege and a real responsibility. But I too go through things and don't always show up at work at 110%.
So one thing, I'm sure there's got to be some media that fuels you and sort of either nourishes or inspires you. What's a podcast or show you wish that you had created?
I'm going to go with The Daily Show. I love The Daily Show. I've loved it for a long time. You know what? Because I think what I love about it is it's smart and funny. So it's just, if I could do something that clever, but I just think it's also simple, right? They didn't have to do anything sort of crazy. But I mean, I wrote the religious Jon Stewart and Trevor Noah. Now John's back on Monday, so I do try to tune back in. But I remember when he left, I thought, I'm not going to be able to get through the day without Jon Stewart, right?
Oh, it's true. I agree, because that's often what I'll do at the end of the day, is just to get some kind of humor.
Yeah, that's right.
Just please remind me why this is funny, and it's true. It's really, really helpful. So then in closing, if you could give your younger self a one-liner of career advice, knowing what you know now, what would it be?
I think build relationships. I think that I wish there had been some relationships I had kept stronger over time. I jumped a lot of jobs. That was just the nature of media at the time. But the relationships that I did build always helped me in the end. I think it opened doors for me. And what I see, honestly, when I look at younger people, particularly young folks who experienced COVID and sat behind a screen and maybe don't come into an office, you're missing building those networks and those relationships and learning and observing from those people that will pay off in spades. The reason I'm in my job is I was invited into rooms. People saw me. I was able to observe how people handle different things. And that made me sort of grow as a human. And that's what I want for people graduating. And I know so many of our young folks are in that space. And that if I was in that space, or I was, I would say to me, it's people, it's relationships, it's learning, having that curiosity and building that and keeping that network strong and reaching out to people.
Right. The old don't burn bridges, because it really is true. You just never know.
You just never know.
And I also think, as a reminder too, we can all help someone, even a college graduate. There's a high school kid who wants to get in. So that whole notion of giving back, right, and paying forward and that kind of thing.
People want to help. I mean, people do want to help. And I think if I could have told myself that, oh, I don't want to bother somebody. I'm a 26-year-old. You're not bothering, especially, coming out of the University of Virginia or whatever college, people have these alumni networks. I'll get kids who write me on LinkedIn or I always talk to them, always. And then I'll tell them, link me in. And if you need something, come back. And I've had one person do it and she ended up at NPR. I was
Oh,
able, right? And so, and
that's
you see,
great.
like, but some people say, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I never hear from them again. But truly build that, and people will help you if they can.
And I will say that I believe this is particularly true of senior level folks because everyone does assume, oh, they're too busy, they're not going to want to listen. But the truth is, it is kind of lonely up there.
That's right.
And also, not saying that you do this, but it's nice for someone to, especially if you have teenage kids, to have someone who actually thinks you do have some wisdom to offer. Just saying, it's not all a big eye roll, but you know what I mean? Where there is value. And so it's,
Yeah.
again, I think it's nice. And I think it gives you a terrific opportunity to kind of find out what's going on out there in the trenches, what people are thinking, what's landing, what's not. So it's really a gift to you as well.
Oh, I agree. I love talking to young people. One, I think just paying it forward. I feel that certainly as I've been sort of helped paying it forward, but just, you keep young by surrounding yourself with different generations. And I always pepper people with questions and,
Yeah.
me, I think it helps me as a leader. It helps me as an executive here at VPM. And I think that mentorship piece is incredibly important. And what a gift as I get later in my career. I mean, it's a wonderful gift, and I appreciate engaging with people.
Well, wonderful. Well, everyone, you know who to reach out to now. You're going to get flooded with an inbox. But seriously,
Yeah.
Jayme, thank you so much for all your insights, your generosity, and also just for being you and really sort of taking on this mantle of public media and making it, opening the doors and helping change its narrative so that people see it through a really great light because it's got so much to offer. And with you at the helm, even that much more.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you very much, Kate. I love the podcast and helping women. So this is wonderful. And thank you for all you do.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Wow, what a terrific conversation with Virginia Public Media's CEO, Jayme Swain. To me, it's no surprise either that she was an athlete because it's been discovered and just revealed that 94% of those females in C-suite positions were. And about 52% of them continued to play throughout college. So go female athletes leading the way. But what I really appreciated was Jayme's openness. I think we're so fortunate to have someone who is as authentic and really takes the role of steward of something as important to those of us who are news consumers to heart. So the three takeaways that I appreciate the most are the fact that PBS is not your grandparents' news. By no means, by no stretch of the imagination. In fact, it has really had to double down on innovation and cutting edge executions of stories. They've done a terrific job really leaning in big to social media. So I guess the takeaway there for me is just keep revisiting your narrative and making sure if you've done a brand audit and you hear and see that people are thinking something that isn't true, get up, get busy, and change it. So go public media on that front. Second, interesting to me that the piece that Jayme took away from running and having executive positions in large media houses was the importance of culture. And it looks as though, and good on her, for taking a moment to realize, wow, my natural inclination, I'm going to have to adjust that and make room for the lives and the styles of those who report to me. And she's obviously done a great job because they're doing some great reporting. And lastly, the piece where she shared about the advice she would give herself, knowing what she knows, which is building relationships. And we all know inherently that that's important. But one of the reasons why it is now more than ever, people are doing all sorts of career shifts, right? And how many pivots can you do? Well, all of those relationships you have in that network, those are the folks that are going to help you in the end. So be sure to be kind and help those behind you and even those ahead of you. You'd be surprised. You've got your own wisdom that they could use. So with that, I look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Let me know what you think. What were your three takeaways? Drop them in the chat. All right. Thanks. And until I see you again for the next Women Advancing.
Thanks for listening. May this episode inspire you to move forward. Be sure to go to iTunes, Spotify, katebyrne.co, that's KATEBYRNE.co, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and listen to even more episodes. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. And be sure to meet them on the next Women Advancing. Ta till next time.